Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, how has the energy and mineral development sector performed so far? What are the challenges and areas of priority going forward? The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development is under scrutiny at an ongoing annual joint sector review that brings different sector players under the theme Sustainable Utilization of Energy and Minerals Resources to Enhance Economic Growth and Development. The energy and mineral sector remains critical to the development of any nation, and in Uganda it has even become more important after the discovery of oil and gas, which is seen as the most critical national resource for the next 30 or even 40 years. Ugandans are eagerly waiting to know how they will benefit from the sector and if the resources to be realized will be properly managed, considering the high levels of corruption rampant today. Parliament is still stuck with the relevant sector laws after disagreements emerged on how critical institutions such as the National Oil Company should be established. One of the other areas of focus is the demand and supply of electricity following the commissioning of the 250-megawatt Bujagali hydropower dam. After the commissioning, government indicated that there would be no load shedding for at least 2 years. It's also during this period, which is under review, that the much-anticipated Karuma hydropower dam stalled due to corruption. The review is also looking at other areas of interest, such as renewable energy, exploration of other minerals, plus other cross-cutting issues. So tonight we look at what is happening at this review meeting to try and understand if the energy and mineral development sector is moving well enough to be able to contribute towards the development of this country. Our guests tonight, Mr. James Baanabe Singoma, Acting Commissioner in charge of the Energy Resources Department at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. You're most welcome, Mr. Baanabe.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Mr. Dickens Kamugisha, Chief Executive Officer of the African Institute for Energy Governance. You're most welcome, Mr. Kamugisha. We expect to be joined by another mineral energy official, Miss Irene Baanabe. She's on her way to this place. Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Baanabe, how is the Uganda's energy sector doing generally?
I think generally we could say that we are much better than we were, especially if we're looking at during this particular review. Last year, around this time, there was a lot of load shedding, and we were having a power deficit. During that time, we were also having thermal energy as part of our energy mix, and government was heavily subsidizing it. Now, this time round, after commissioning of the Bujagali hydropower project, it has brought in renewable energy, in other words, less polluting compared to the thermal we're using, and it doesn't demand subsidies like the thermal was doing. So we would say, as we're doing our review this time round, we're saying we're in a better situation because we have enough power, at least to run our industries, to run our household. There could be some challenges, but still they are being addressed.
Let's look at the type of energies we're talking about. Most times we talk about hydropower. Is that the only source of energy we can have?
Well, we not only looking at hydropower, we're also looking at geothermal. Currently, there are studies that are going on to establish this potential that we have for
geothermal. That's hot springs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we're also looking at cogeneration from the sugar industries. They also currently we're having about 25 megawatts that's coming from the sugar industries.
What do you call that again? The sugar, the power from bagasse.
Yeah, power from the bagasse. Bagasse will be burned in a boiler, generate steam at high pressure. The pressures will turn turbines, just like the water turns the turbine and generate electricity. So there we expect to get more 30 megawatts from Kakira, 10 megawatts this year and 20 megawatts next year. And Chinyala also has a potential to give us about 30, but we need to put up an evacuation line so we can take the power from the factory into the grid network, and also Sugar Corporation of Uganda has the potential to give us about 10 or so. So we're looking at geothermal, we're looking at cogeneration, we're looking at the mini hydros, but we're also looking at other forms like peat. Now, peat is a young coal. There's a particular farm that is looking at developing peat also in Kabale area, and even there is the solar thermal, where you can use solar to heat water, and the water can generate steam and then turn turbine. The challenge, of course, is with the other sources, they're a little bit more expensive, but the fact that hydro is cheaper compared to the others, that's why we tend to go for it first. We look at the least cost when we're talking of what to develop.
Yes, and of course it's clean energy as well.
Yeah, but you also should remember that with the discoveries of petroleum resources, we will also be looking at gas for power generation. We'll also be using heavy fuel oil that will be coming from the refineries when that time comes.
Right.
And so we'll still have thermal, but this time using our own local resources. So we are looking at an energy mix so that we can have a better security of supply.
You're not talking about wind power. You're not talking anything about nuclear power, coal energy.
Well,
I should call.
I mentioned
no wind, no coal, nuclear.
No, for wind, with the support of the European Union, we're going to be doing some studies in Karamoja to establish the wind potentials, because you must have the figures first before you can tell how many megawatts you can generate. So there's a study that's going on with German also giving us the money for the equipment to measure the speeds. So we're also looking at wind, but we're starting off with Karamoja. The fact is that Karamoja has very good wind speeds.
It's a general flat area with a few hazelbugs here and there.
So it's quite, and it's because it's also closer to the Kenyan side, and the Kenyan speeds are much higher than ours. I think there could be a link with that. And the more you tend to go inwards, I think the speeds tend to reduce. But that will be established. When we establish the wind speeds, then we can tell how much we can generate from the wind.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, and how it can link up now with the network, because the wind will not be available all the time. So you also must have. It's better when you're also feeding it into the grid, or if you're using it just for water pumping. And so that will be a limited activity. So when it's available, you can do the water pumping. When it's not, now to avoid some of those challenges, it's much better when you link it into the grid, so that when the wind speed is not available, you can have the grid, or you can have solar or something else.
All right.
Some bit of backup.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Kamugisha, you come from the civil society. Do you think we're using our energy mix well?
I think, in my opinion, the Ministry of Energy and the government generally, they are trying their best, especially from the policy perspective. If you look at the Electricity Act 1999, it is a good act. You look at the policy, Energy Policy 2002, it is actually a good policy.
Yes. Go on.
It's a good policy, but I think if you look at the energy sources we have in Uganda and you see how we are tapping those energy sources, I think we are not doing well. Because right now you have almost 90%, over 90% of energy sources, the clean energy, is from hydro. But you are talking of, we are at the equator, so you can tap a lot of solar for our energy sources. So those other sources they are talking about, we have failed to turn the policy into action. I think that is the challenge that we are having. Every time I think we've been hearing that the biggest challenge was lack of enough water in Lake Victoria and River Nile.
Yes.
So as a result, you will find that if you are relying on one source, anything that happens to that source becomes a problem.
Right.
Second, I think the government has failed actually to deal with the problem of corruption in the energy sector. And because the energy sector involves very huge projects, you find it's where most of the corruption is, where we have developed dams. Those dams actually are not yet performing. Because, Edmond, you know very well,
small ones,
even the big ones, you know very well that we have been crying of thermal generators, which were recently generating 170 megawatts. And the government has been telling Ugandans that it was the thermal generators that were causing a lot of expenses. So the tariffs were very high. But along the way, the thermal generators have been eliminated. But at the time when they were being removed, and Bujagara was coming on board in 2011, it is when electricity actually almost the tariffs doubled. So you just look at how how we are planning, because at the end of the day, it is not going to be the amount of electricity, of energy you generate. Also, the economics in there must be taken into account. So today, we even don't know how much power we have, because if we are having 170 megawatts from thermal, we moved it and we put 250 megawatts from Bujagari. And now the government is saying actually we have almost excess electricity.
And there's load shedding in the capital.
Not even if the capital people are very lucky. Because last week I was in Chibale, I was in Hoima, I was in Masindi. I tell you, those people 7 days a week, from 6 in the morning up to 7 in the evening, they don't have electricity. Even those who have phones who have water, they cannot even charge. They have to charge during the night.
So power comes only in the night?
Yes, power comes during the night. And most of those people definitely at night, what are they doing? They don't have industry.
They can't do their welding at night.
So at the end of the day, when you are trying to measure the performance of our energy sector, I think we would understand. If you look at, for example, the National Development Plan, up to now, it says in Uganda, our energy per capita consumption is around 75. If you compare it with Kenya,
kilowatts per hour.
Yes, per hour. Kenya is around 159. In Ghana, it is around 250.
Don't even talk about South Africa.
Yeah, of course, those ones you cannot talk about them, because we are talking about, if you compare us with Malaysia that we've been talking about, South Korea that developed, they are in 8,000, 3,000 per capita per hour. So for us, when we are when you are generating our clean energy, we must make sure, look at the problem. Why is it that even people who have been connected are not consuming power?
Okay.
Yes.
We'll talk about that probably if time allows. And of course, energy, hydropower is limited. We can only get 5,000 megawatts or thereabouts.
Yes.
From if we utilize every resource that we have.
And of course, the most important thing is that what you plan today for power, you cannot wake up there and you generate. You must do research, and the research you must compare it with different other societies that are doing the same. But here in Uganda, I think you find when a crisis comes, we say now let's go to wind. Another crisis, let's go to solar. But you have to plan in advance.
Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. How has the energy and mineral development sector performed so far? What are the challenges and areas of priority going forward? Our guest tonight, Mr. James Baanabe Singoma, Acting Commissioner in charge of the Energy Resources Department at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. Mr. Dickens Kamugisha, Chief Executive Officer at the African Institute for Energy Governance. We've also just been joined by Ms. Irene Baanabe, Petroleum Officer in charge of refining. You're most welcome, Madame Baanabe. She's representing the Refinery Development Manager, so she's going to be talking to us a great deal about that refinery, the 29 square kilometers that were required and the compensation and all those things. You're most welcome, Madame Baanabe.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers.
Viewers, because we're also on the internet. Talk to us about the oil, the refinery. When do the bricks begin to get laid?
Thank you. Dear viewers, I'll just give you a brief background on how we've reached to this point where Uganda has decided to develop a refinery in Uganda. We conducted a feasibility study for refining in 2010-2011, and this was conducted by a reputable firm called Foster Wheeler Energy Limited, all the way from the UK, and it was a participatory study where government clearly participated and understood the assumptions and the key recommendations arising from that study. One of the key aspects assessed in that study was the refinery capacity tying in with the crude oil resources in the country and the product demand for refined products in the country. So based on the Uganda's petroleum consumption at that time, but which is now approaching 30,000 barrels of oil per day, and the regional demand, which is approaching 200,000 barrels of oil per day, it was deemed necessary that Uganda develops a base case refinery of 60,000 barrels of oil per day, and this will later be expanded to 120,000 barrels per day and a further 180,000 barrels per day in the long term. So it is that commercialization plan that government is taking forward to ensure ensure our crude oil reserves are utilized in the most sustainable manner. And viewers, just to inform you that the regional demand for Uganda and its neighbors is growing at an average of 7% per annum. This basically goes to show that our consumption for petroleum products is rising very terrifically. But however, you can all see this from the number of vehicles that each one of us is purchasing. As your neighbor has a vehicle and your colleague at work has a vehicle, and all these vehicles need to be fueled. So a refinery in Uganda will contribute immensely to meeting our petroleum product demand.
And some of this is going to be exported. We can't consume all the energy, the oil, once we begin to refine it.
Yes. Initially, we are looking, depending on the crude oil reserves, the government's plan is we utilize all the reserves to first meet our petroleum product demand.
Regional demand, but we can't consume it all in the region.
It depends on the market and then the crude oil reserves. If the crude oil reserves are not enough, sufficient to meet both the local and regional demand and then export, we will first focus on the local and the region. And then should there be excess crude oil reserves compared to the petroleum market, we can then start thinking of exportation.
Economic sense.
Yeah, have we found, of course, I've looked at some of the figures, but let's talk about finance. Have we got financing for this?
We are in the process.
I know that an Egyptian company is ready to give us $2.5 billion. Have you been talking to them?
We read about it in the newspapers, but we engage many potential investors. So Citadel, Egypt is not the only investor that has expressed interest. So there are several investors, but government is in the process of structuring this project ready for promotion. So we've not yet identified the lead investor, but we are preparing to send out an expression of interest for the potential investor by the end of this year.
All right, Mr. Baanabe, why do we still have load shedding? We have this excess power, and we have load shedding of all places in the capital besides.
Yeah, I think we need to differentiate between load shedding and power failure. And that at times it's very difficult to tell, because from the consumer side, the moment power goes off, you just say load shedding. But there are times when transformers fail. There are times when the network fails. So it's not load shedding. Load shedding usually, it's even published in the newspaper. They say there will be a load shedding rota, and such and such areas will be switched off in such and such a time. But what we have is at times we're announcing that the following areas will not have power, as we will be undertaking some maintenance or attending to some faults of some kind. So what we have are really issues to do with the network breaking down. And I think that the issue, like my friend here has raised, in some parts of Hoima and Masindi, is really the lines that are broken down, that are in a poor state, that cannot deliver the power in the places where the power is required. But in terms of power availability, there's enough.
You have enough electricity?
Yeah, at the moment there's enough power.
So it's basically about transmission and distribution?
Yes, at times you find transformers failing, at times they have to play around with the available network, supply some people, turn off the others, and that kind of stuff, if they don't have enough power. I mean, reaching particular areas, these are more of localized places.
Right.
Yeah.
Briefly, what's the update on Karuma? We've been waiting eagerly for electricity from that side. What's happening there?
Right now, what is happening, the settlement of the affected people is going on. But on the side of the procurement, I think you should have read in the press where some concerned citizens kept raising some concerns, and so it's reached the extent where they were taken to court, and there was a court injunction which had suspended the process. But the good news is that the court later on ruled that the process should continue, and meanwhile the issues that have been raised, if they should be reviewed through the normal process, what we call an administrative review.
Yes.
So whatever has been raised, whoever thinks has an issue, is all going to be addressed. But at the same time, the process will be moving on.
So we expect power from Karuma sometime. 600 megawatts, is it?
I mean, we have to identify a contractor first.
Well, what's the expectation?
600 megawatts.
And when do we expect, how long will the construction take? 3 years?
It will take about 4 to 5.
4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Is it going to be phased or is it coming online at once?
No, the installation of the turbines will be phased.
Like we had it in Bujaga?
Yeah, because the demand doesn't pick up immediately. Although the civil works could be done at once, but then the installation of the turbines can take a phased approach.
And then very briefly, we expect some small hydropower stations come online in the middle.
Yes, quite a number are being developed.
We'll talk about those. This is Spectrum. We'll go for a break. We'll be back.
Excuse me, guys. Let me through, please.
Yes.
What?
Check this guy. Goodness, dude, what are you doing? Get real.
Just move a little bit.
Man, what are you doing bringing a cow into the sitting room?
It's just for when I want milk.
Just what?
Just please move. Let it come and sit here.
What's wrong with this guy?
You cannot keep a cow in your home, but you can get the freshness of its milk straight from the farm into your home. Get fresh dairy milk for freshness straight from the farm every day. Fresh Diary, so fresh.
We have big dreams for our girl Rita, and we're doing all we can to make sure she gets the best possible education.
Imagine us at Rita's graduation ceremony at Cape Town University with the Stanbic Bank Super Cool Namutima salary loan. We are able to ensure that Rita gets a head start for the future. Education is an investment that she will have all her life.
Who knows? Rita could be the first Ugandan woman to be the president.
You never know.
Take a new Super Cool salary loan or top up and enter the draw to win super cool prizes. Visit any Stanbic Bank to find out how you can apply for a Super Cool Namutima salary loan. Offer valid until April 2013. Stanbic Bank. Moving forward. Stanbic Bank Uganda Limited, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda, license number A1.013.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. How has the energy and mineral development sector performed so far? What are the challenges and areas of priority going forward? Our guests tonight, Mr. James Baanabe Isingoma, Acting Commissioner in charge of Energy Resources at the Energy Resources Department of the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. Ms. Irene Batebe, Petroleum Officer in charge of refining. She's representing the Refinery Development Manager in the Petroleum Exploration and Production Department. And Mr. Dickens Kamugisha, Chief Executive Officer of the African Institute for Energy Governance. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Mr. Baanabe, briefly about this hydropower well. Bujagali is supposed to take us for 2 years. Karuma will take maybe another 4 or 5 years. What do we do in the 3 years intervening period?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Now, as we realize that the demand is not static, it's growing, as you rightly said, we will be having within the next 2 or so years, the surplus capacity will be taken up. But we're also looking at the other resources, the renewable resources. I mentioned one of them is cogeneration. We're going to get some power from cogeneration. We're also looking at the mini hydros. We've got a number.
So the hydros that we've identified, they can bridge that gap, you think?
It's a mixture, plus thermal as well. Thermal plants using the local resources.
Well, but thermal, we put it offline because it was expensive.
Yeah, but
we don't expect oil to flow until 5 years from now. You think we'll have some money?
Well, there's a decision that has been taken that we can use crude to generate power instead of importing HFO.
And crude can be available like right now. We have some in containers already.
Well, within the next 2 years, it can be made available.
All right. Irene, talk to us about this refinery. Do we really need a refinery? Can't we export crude to the ocean?
Thank you very much, Edmond. Clearly, Uganda does need a refinery, and this refinery will come with so many benefits, and I'll just highlight a few key ones for the listeners. There's no doubt for any country that develops a refinery, this is usually viewed as a strategic development that ensures the competitiveness of the country in terms of improving the economic stand of the country. The feasibility study we conducted clearly proved to us that by developing our refinery, we shall save approximately $1 billion per year that we incur in importing petroleum products all the way from Singapore and the Arabian Gulf. This is quite expensive, but there are many other benefits.
1 billion or 1.6 billion? I think I've seen a 1.6 billion.
I said about, so
all right, go on.
Exactly, we could approach 1.6. And the refinery will be giving us a whole range of products. We'll have liquefied petroleum gas that we are currently importing all the way. LPG that we use in our houses for domestic consumption. So this will boost Commissioner Baanabe's Section 2, because this way we can reduce on the amount of biomass that we are currently using. Charcoal and firewood. But we'll also be producing heavy fuel oil that we can use in our thermal power plants, and we don't have to keep importing for the medium term. And the factories like Hima Cement and Tororo Cement that use a lot of HFO. The refinery will also be producing what we call petroleum coke. This can be used as a substitute for coal in the iron and steel industry. Yes, so we can reduce on coal importation or other raw materials for the steel industry in the country. Right. But we cannot underestimate the fact that developing this refinery is going to, in a way, ensure that we develop our reserves in a sustainable manner. Right. Because you control how much crude oil you will extract. Yes.
And of course, when you talk about products, I mean, I'm really interested in that. We also have plastics. Plastic products, a whole range. You know, right now we still import those raw materials, and from beauty products. What do you call them? Beauty cosmetics, as well. The time cuts us short. Let's talk about the land. Do we still have the 29 square kilometers, or they're building shopping malls on part of that land?
Interesting. Thank you, Edmond. Like you have heard, the government is in the process of acquiring 29 square kilometers of land in Kavale Parish, Buseruka sub-county. The land sounds to be massive, but this land is going to be used for many other things, like accommodating the refinery, future associated industries like the petrochem industry, staff quarters for people who will be working in the refinery.
You're talking about the whole town, basically.
Almost, like Kilembe, for those who have visited Kilembe.
I've been to both.
Yes, it's like a small satellite town. Okay. So we're in the process of acquiring the 29 square kilometers. We're in the final stages of conducting the resettlement action plan study, which has clearly come up with key findings, because the consultant for that study has submitted his preliminary findings. So he has also come up with a valuation report for that particular land, which has been submitted to the chief government valuer in the Ministry of Lands for consideration.
All right, Mr. Kamugisha, we're having issues with the laws. They are not yet in Parliament. Some are in Parliament and some are not yet there. We expect our 3 pieces of legislation. Are you happy with the way things are going? You observe from the civil society perspective.
Of course, I have to give credit to government that they finally prepared the laws, the bills, and now they are before Parliament, and it is now incumbent upon Parliament to make sure that those bills are enacted into laws. And hopefully, once the laws are enacted, then I think everybody can be on board. But at the moment, if you hear him talking about this refinery, I think the biggest challenge that we've been having in Uganda, and which you also know, is I think secrecy and corruption. Yes. Even the refinery process itself, I think we are at the moment talking like as if we are trying to create an impression that everything is rosy when it is not.
What is not?
I think recently when you had during the state of address presentation by the president,
State of the Nation.
when he was State of the Nation, when he was clearly saying that actually
not the play but the state presidential address.
Yes,
State of the Nation play has been they've declared it illegal. Go on.
Yes, saying that actually the companies are not yet interested in a refinery. So when you talk of doing a feasibility study for the refinery and actually concluding that you want a refinery, when we're knowing that whatever has been happening in Uganda, the companies are the ones which have been injecting in money. So how come that
this is different? Like, the oil companies have opposed the refinery, saying they want to exploit crude, which is expensive and doesn't add value, doesn't create jobs, doesn't give us all these services.
Of course, Edmond, that's
what we is financed by the government.
The government of Uganda cannot have the money for the refinery, and it cannot invest in a refinery because the reason why is that you would bring this economy completely down.
What do you mean?
But at the end of the day, for us to develop, you really need to make sure that the public-private partnership.
How would you bring the economy down by bringing a refinery? Explain that for us.
The refinery, there is no doubt that if you look at the refinery in Mombasa of around 60,000 barrels a day,
yes,
it costs around 3.7 billion.
Well, right now it's different. You can get a small barrel for 1.1 billion.
No, even
the one we're talking about is about 2.5 billion.
No, I mean when we are because the plans, as you are hearing the government officials presenting, is that we want to upgrade that one.
Yes, 61, 21,
yes, that refinery. So it means you have to construct a refinery that is going to be upgradable.
Yes.
And people have been saying that, such a refinery, you must construct a state-of-the-art refinery. Secondly, our oil, as you know, is waxy.
Yes.
And at least if you've been talking to experts, waxy crude is very difficult to refine. So when you are refining, you have to make sure that the cost of refining that oil is actually compared.
We should fly it out of the country.
No, for me, what we need to do, I think that's where I think Irene was saying participation. We need to make sure that there is at least there is effective participation in making decisions. If we have to build a refinery, let's calculate what does it take to manufacture, process a waxy crude here in Uganda, transport it all over the country, or transport it to Kenya. What does it take? Now that we have Southern Sudan applying to join East Africa, it has more oil and better oil. We have Kenya is discovering oil. So all these facts, I think Ugandans would want to understand them. Otherwise, it is not a guarantee that if you build a refinery, Ugandan is going to get actually better prices. No.
I'd like you to talk to us.
Recently, you heard in Nigeria, they were demonstrating about prices.
All right, thank you. But before, I'd like you to talk to us about the meeting that you're having. But before you do that, let's hear from the refinery lady here.
Okay, thank you, Edmond, and thank you, Kamugisha. I would like to clarify on many key issues. Mr. Kamugisha highlighted that he has been interacting with experts, and they've indicated that the Ugandan crude is very waxy and therefore needs a state-of-the-art technology. I would like to clarify that in our feasibility study, we came up with clear designs in terms of configurations that can clearly process Uganda's crude oil to achieve products that match with our demand.
What figures do you have? 60,000, how much will you pay for it?
At that time when the study was done around 2010, 2011, the estimate for the complex refinery at 60,000 barrels, we were looking at about $2 billion US. And just to highlight that this is going to be developed as a PPP, and private partnership. So this is achievable.
Private-public
partnership, yes.
All right.
So I do not want to completely agree that it is impossible. It is achievable, and our findings and analysis have clearly shown that.
Time cuts us short. Let's hear from the Commissioner. Talk to us about this meeting that you're having at Hotel Africana.
No, at Hotel Africana, we're having what we call the joint sector review. Now, this is a requirement by government that every sector gets together with its development partners, the key people, the key agencies in that sector, the districts where you're operating. You get together and kind of agree. First of all, get to know how you're performing, people to have a feeling of how you're performing, but also agree with them on what next you're going to do in the next financial year. It's something that we do before we do the planning, because we around December there, we start planning for the next financial year. There's the whole planning process. So During this sector review, we are reviewing how we've performed, and the stakeholders are also letting us know where the challenges are, the needs are, some of the issues, some of the bottlenecks, and so together we come up with strategies of how they can be addressed. It's like a family together, looking at the issues, looking at the challenges, and agreeing on a solution. We don't want to take
who sits in the room when you're talking about those things?
No, right now we have all these key agencies that are in the ministry. For example, we have Electricity Regulatory Authority, we have Road Education Agency, we have Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited, Transmission Company Limited, Distribution Company Limited, Umeme, we have Atomic Council, we have got the different departments of energy, all the units that are within the energy sector. We have got leaders of the districts. We've actually invited 40 districts, they are represented there. We've also have the development partners, people who are financing the sector, the donors. We also have the private sector.
They've been cutting edge in certain sectors. Maybe you've had, maybe you haven't.
Not in energy.
Go on.
And then we also have the private sector, people who are running some of these equipments, some of these power stations. They're also there. So together, we agree on some actions. We'll be agreeing on some undertakings.
Right.
Say, like in the next financial year,
what you want to do.
What shall we agree upon?
It's an annual meeting. This is the last one. What have we got in the basket?
No, since the last one, there were some areas we agreed upon. Like one of the things that was a major concern, I'll just point out, was that when we go out in the districts, at times we don't involve the leaders very well, and so we end up with some problems.
DLC1 officials.
Yeah. So like in this particular case, like the Karunga, for example, the compensation.
In Vijayabel, there's a problem with butterflies and spirits, so you don't want the same mistakes repeated in Karuma.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So right now we're working with them. We communicate to them before in advance. Even this today it came up somewhere in Mubende.
People who fetch firewood from nearby.
The chairman was saying that it's important to involve them when we're doing some of these programs, so that we don't end up with problems with the wananchi. So we're able to. We've been able to do a number of things that we had agreed upon.
Right.
Example, like the commissioning of some of these power plants, we had agreed that we would expedite them.
Right.
Like Nyagak has been commissioned. We will be commissioning Buseruka shortly. And
okay. So you're happy, you're making progress?
From the donor perspective, the donors are very happy. But last time when we met, they also were urging us to remove subsidies from power.
The donors, the man who pays the piper.
So
normally,
the citizens.
The challenge was financing. The issue was sustainability in the financing.
All right.
Because they were concerned that most of the money was going to the energy sector, and yet other sectors like health, education were suffering. So at least that.
All right. Let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, you can call in our number 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Spectrum, hello? Spectrum, hello? Yes, our number 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. Spectrum, hello? Please talk to us. Okay, Spectrum, hello. Hello, sir, your name? Yes, Bright. Spectrum, hello. Spectrum, hello. I'll find a caller tonight. Let's get the responses right now, Irene.
Okay. Thank you. I'll start with Martin's question that petroleum jelly is not a direct product of refining. It's good to use the word direct, meaning that does it come out directly from the refinery? No, it does not. But there are components from the refining process that you can use to produce petroleum jelly. So you add some other additives to reach the jelly. But the jelly does not come out as a direct product from the refinery. That's true, but you can use some of the outputs from the refinery to prepare the jelly.
Yes.
And then moving on to one of the listeners.
Well, let's talk about Paul. You raised quite a number of issues. We'll talk about the others as well. You're raising the hopes too high. You talk about coke. Do we have enough demand for coke? We know our steel industry is really almost non-existent. LPG, do we have enough demand for LPG? That's gas in the homes and other products. Cheaper oil from India. Will we have competition from them?
Thank you. Listeners, one of the key things that we do when we are conducting any assessment, we look at the demand. So we clearly design the refinery to match the demand. So we do the 200,000 barrels I spoke about per day are the current regional demand. But I indicated that based on our findings, we were starting with a base case refinery of 60,000 barrels per day. Why? So that this refinery can get market for its products. So it's not that we are matching the whole 200,000 barrels per day at the start, but looking at the regional demand and how it's growing, we will then phase it accordingly. That's the plan, matching with the demand that is existent in the country and part of the region.
Mr. Baanabe, is this all too academic, getting people's hopes high?
No, the discussion we're having is not really academic. I mean, as you note, the fact that right now we have Buchagali, it was because some time ago people planned, and only that was delayed, but it was planned. So the planning is even doing to do with reunification, extending power in the rural area. There are districts that right now we can talk about that were electrified just in the last financial year, and there are more districts that are being electrified. So it's not academic, it is resulting into some action, and some results are happening. There are people who are happy that right now they are connected. If you talk to people from Karamoja right now, they are very appreciative that the grid has now reached that area.
Or they consume electricity?
Yeah.
Mostly for what?
I mean,
lighting?
Currently it's lighting, but you know they have some resources there to the extent that if we can have, now that there's power, the investors can now think in terms of investing. For example, the raw material that is used for cement in Tororo, the limestone, is ferried all the way from Karamoja to Tororo.
For production, for processing?
Yeah, because they are endowed with resources. Now that power is available, some industries can start in that area as well. There is so it's not academic, and we discuss it with our development partners. We always do the planning. The difference right now is we're not planning alone, we're planning with the stakeholders, and I think that's a very good development.
200 megawatts from Bujagali, what went wrong? Where did the 50 go?
No, I think the challenge is that I think maybe we're not giving out enough information.
It was ghost power. You have ghosts a lot these days, gone.
No, the load shedding, as I said, it's not load shedding, it's power failure. And I thought the gentleman from Umeme would have helped clarify on that, because this is affecting him directly. People are thinking it's not because there is power, but I think it's because Umeme network is failing. But also he raises a point in that the power is not going to last, that the 2 years,
it's about 6 months.
Yeah,
it will be swamped already.
Yeah, but at times we also should be aware that we just last month we had Electromax giving us additional capacity of 30 megawatts of thermal.
Yes.
But not necessarily being dispatched, but it's a capacity that's available. But also the thermal plants that we're having right now, they're not being dispatched. So there's idle capacity right now that will now help take up some of this load as it's developing. I mean, we
could get heavy duty fuel from Bulisa and run the thermal plants.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's the plan. And also cogeneration, as I mentioned, Kakira will be giving us Bagas 10 megawatts, and they also give us 30 megawatts. And plus, we also have another thermal plant that's planning by Investpro. They have a permit, and we're hoping that they can show up and plus what we're planning with in the oil region.
Irene, I'd like you to talk to us about the environmental impact, but before you do that, let's hear from Dickens. What are your views? Do you also agree this is an academic talk? We're not touching certain buttons?
I honestly believe it is not academic purely, but the biggest challenge is that government is not honest and telling us that.
This elected government?
Yes.
How can you say that?
You take an example in 2009 when we are going to construct the area production scheme. I tell you the way they raised the expectations of Ugandans that they were about to get oil.
They said 2012.
Yes, it failed. Bujagali, you see, when they are building it, they said the tariffs are going to reduce because we are going to remove thermal power. The tariffs increased after putting Bujagali on board. Then for the refinery, you just look at it, and I think the quota was very, very clear. Too good to be true.
Yeah.
Because you have a refinery here, you are going to, it's not, except if you are going to stop imports. But if you are going to allow imports, I tell you it will be cheaper for companies, effective companies, to process products even in the Middle East, put them on the ocean, transport them here. They are cheaper than what? You take an example of sugar. Sugar is manufactured in Kenya, transported here, and it is still cheaper. Here the sugar is more expensive.
Let's hear from Irene about the environment impact assessment and cheaper fuel. Will it be cheap? Will it be more expensive to buy fuel made at home?
Okay, thank you, Edmond. Addressing the environment impact assessment query, the listener wanted to know whether we are taking care of the environment. I would like to
have a minute, please.
Okay, inform the listeners that for every activity that is undertaken in the Albertine Graben in the oil and gas sector, there has to be an EIA undertaken.
By NEMA.
And this is undertaken by NEMA under the guidance of the Ministry of Energy, specifically the Petroleum Exploration and Production Department. And for the refinery, we are in the process of undertaking an environmental baseline study that will then feed into a detailed environmental impact assessment.
Well, I've been to that area, and what I saw, it's still a clean operation. My concern, though, is when the wheels begin to turn. Will they have the capacity to manage all the waste? We wait to see. Right now, it looks like it's clean and everyone is being responsible.
Allow me, Edmond,
briefly.
I want to also add that we are putting together a clear legal and regulatory framework to ensure that any licensee in that area will comply to strict environmental regulations.
Anyway, I have to go. Thank you very much, dear guests. Mr. James Baanabe Singoma, Acting Commissioner in charge of the Energy Resources Department at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. And thank you for coming to Spectrum tonight. Mr. Dickens Kamugisha, Chief Executive Officer of AFIEGO, that's the African Institute for Energy Governance. Miss Irene Baanabe, Petroleum Officer in charge of refining, standing in for the Refinery Development Manager. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
Imagine never being unreachable again. Imagine no more buffering and unreliable